Welcome to Fulfilling This Belly Sting. A show dedicated to aligning a journey to a better mental health using the understandings of the ancient Norse. Join us each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Alaska time. Someone's little girl, daughter, sister, girlfriend, fiance, wife, cousin, mother, auntie, grandmother, great grandmother, elder, disappears, shattering, a family, a community, the world. There is something we can all do. Remember them. Look at that.
God Morgan, and happy Tears Day to you. Today we're talking about the courage of tear, and we're going to talk about courage intrinsic, to see past maybe those painful memories, maybe those memories that don't hold value for us anymore. Before we get started today, I want to say a huge talk to those of you who have liked, followed, and subscribed. Thank you. For those who have yet to do so, please hit that like, follow, subscribe button. You won't be disappointed. It helps to distribute this message even further so that those who may need to hear these words can hear those. All right, so in addition, I want to give a huge shout out to my friends and family at New Reality TV. Newrealitytv.com is a streaming channel dedicated to the plethora of perspectives that can hopefully help us to find our way, to hopefully find something that resonates within us, that helps to drive us forward and helps us to find that better mental space. If you happen to have a few extra coins that you want to put to good use, by all means, check out our donation site, which is pay.akoutlaw.com. There you can drop in those coins, and we will use those to promote or to further our electronic platform as well as our in-person platform. Now, as always, for those of you who are more interested in me, my shows, my message, my teachings, certainly my life coaching services, check out norsewhispers.com/coaching. There you can find out all the information about me and those things that I have to help. This morning, our chat is available on YouTube and Facebook, so be sure to drop your comments or questions into the chat, and we'll take a look and see what we can come up with together. All right. So today we're talking about Tyr, the Norse god Tyr. Now, many people immediately assume or associate Tyr with courage, and he certainly had that in spades, but he was also the god of justice and law. He understood the balance of the world, of what was right and wrong. Now, understand that's a very conditional thing. It's a very regional thing. Right and wrong, good and bad. It's very localized. So think about it if we look at that time frame from a perspective of the Norse people. Breaking an oath in Norse culture is a horrible thing, and it would lead very quickly to you being labeled as an outlaw. Now, modern day, of course, we use the term outlaw very loosely, and it's cute, and people who want to pretend that they're more than they really are will use that term to address themselves. And while it's very fancy, today it has no real negative stigma attached to it. It's kind of, in some ways, a cool marketing trick. But in the days of the Norse were very particular about this thing. They, being labeled an outlaw, being found to be an outlaw in the eyes of tribal law, was basically worse than death. You could be outlawed, banished, obviously, from the clan. You could be made to be a servant, indentured servant, where you would have to earn back your freedom over a extended period of time. It was a very tough thing. Now, as I've read about my family ancestry, one of the ways that the Ulfhafnar and the Berserkers were actually run down, if you will, or disbanded, was that the Christian law came in at the time and banned them, and determined that all Ulfhafnar and Berserkers were outlaws. And so, again, leading to this understanding, regional, that outlaws, the state of outlaw, was considered very bad. This is how the church did it. Now, in my family's history, as we look at several of my grandfathers, where we have documentation where they were executed for being Ulfhafnar, and they were executed because they had been outlawed. And my grandfathers, of course, did not, couldn't surrender their bloodline, so they paid that price for it. It's something very, I think, very powerful to know, is when we talk about right and wrong, good and bad, here, there. It's very regional. It's very localized. What may be illegal and wrong in one area may not be in another. I think of several years ago now. This is probably a decade ago. Maybe not that far. Where the use of marijuana was coming into vogue. And there were several states that legalized it and said, yeah, marijuana is not such a big deal. We'll legalize it to a degree, obviously, and of course, not for distribution, not for this, not for that. But it was very regionalized, right? So states like, I think it was Washington, the state of Washington, I think ultimately did it. I know it's legal here in the state of Alaska. There were several states that did it, but federally, and as the lion's share, it was still illegal. So one had to be very cognizant, obviously, if you lived next to a state that it was still illegal. You had to be sure that you didn't have any on you should you cross state lines. So we see that good, bad, right, wrong is very regional, it's very localized. And when we think about the legal system, well, of course, the legal system today in the United States is not all it's cracked up to be. In the days of my ancestors, what was considered a sin, or not even a sin, sin's kind of a horrible word of guilt and shame, but this assignment of the outlaw moniker to an individual in one area of Scandinavia, if you will, meant very little to another. So you could have been an outlaw to the Danes, but not to the Nords or to the Icelanders, right? So it just didn't warrant the same. So we find a lot of this throughout history, and one of the things we need to kind of walk away from, or we need to kind of wrap our mind around when we're looking at ourselves and the guilt and the shames that society will use to control a population. It's been in use since bipedal humanoids could speak some level of tongue. In that, right, we always have that, well, you shouldn't do that because, and this is really the ability or the attempt to extrinsically motivate someone else to do something that they weren't doing, right? So in the shame case of using shame against someone else, we're going to point out the bad, and we're going to make them feel bad, but we're attempting to make them feel bad based on our bar. Now, I think about being a parent, or even a grandparent for that matter, when we're trying to wrap our minds around, getting our children to behave in a certain way. In many cases, we will apply guilt and shame to, you shouldn't have done that. That was bad. Now you've ruined it. So on and so on. This is really the application of the emotional state of guilt and shame, and we're going to try to apply it to someone else. But what we need to remember, and this is kind of where we grow, right? We mature, is we begin to understand as we become older parents, we're now trying to apply our measuring stick, our bar of understanding to someone else. You have to do or believe or understand what I do the way I do, or you're wrong, and you'll be punished. And this is really where we find the monotheistic church coming into existence throughout Europe and certainly ultimately the world, is that one of their main tenets was believe this and adhere to it, or you will perish in the fires of hell for eternity, right? So you're a sinner and you're going to go to hell. And this was really a tool that has been used for as long as, again, since humans could speak. The issue that arises with this is that when we assign guilt and shame to other people, and there's a negative energy to it, there's that negativity, the contrast in energy to what they may be living, or just simply adding to what they're already feeling bad about. This is really one of those things that we kind of have to evaluate for ourselves and each turn. How much of that guilt and shame are we carrying beyond its useful value? When does it no longer serve us? So, my mother is an example, wonderful woman, definitely a gift of the gods, has told me, I shouldn't cross my eyes because they could get stuck that way. Have your parents told you that? How many times have we heard, some of the faces we made, that, again, it was my mother's bar that she was trying to enforce upon me. Now, this is a very light case, obviously, but nonetheless, there was a guilt and a shame attempted to be applied extrinsically to me So I would have absorbed the energy and said, man, maybe I shouldn't do that. Right? Well, that's kind of been society's methodology at normalizing everything, making everything more or less vanilla. And this is the struggle that we have, or we may experience, as we try to wrap our minds and our hearts around our cultural heritage, whatever that is, whether it be the indigenous pride of the Dene people, wherever they're from, whether it be Egyptian or Greek or I know many Balkan countries and Eastern Bloc countries always have wonderful, beautiful cultures and heritages that should be celebrated and embraced. I know many of the Far Eastern countries, amazing cultures and heritages that they should carry forward. Amazing energy. It's amazing. When I get the wonderful opportunity to visit with friends and I would call them family, they're on the steppes of Mongolia, and we can just embrace their culture, their nomadic culture. It is amazing. The energy is just palpable. I mean, you could just, it's so awesome. I have some friends who are very traditional in the Far East, the Japanese culture and heritage, and another amazing culture. And love it. I also have some friends who are Aboriginal from the Australian continent, and we talk, and it's amazing to see and be in that culture. Well, what I've discovered in my own life as I discovered my cultural heritage of the Norse, and certainly the Danes, the Germanic Danes, even before they became recognized as the Norse, was as the more I studied them and the more I embraced who they are and what they accomplished, I began to build this cultural pride. I really began to embrace everything about what it was to be, what it is to be, or Norse. It was amazing. I've always very much culture and that my shield maiden is really in the cultural anthropology, and so it was really marriage made in heaven. Ta-ding! But nonetheless, it was really, I've always very much appreciated the culture. But what I found is that there was an energy stream to that. And then honor began to form. Now, a little self-reveal. In my past, particularly leading all the way back to my early 20s, honor was not one of those things I was very concerned with. It just wasn't. I kind of superseded, bravado with honor. I pretended to be a badass, and I thought I was so tough and this, that, and the other thing. And what I was really doing is just, filling in where my self-worth and the honor wasn't there. And I was trying to kind of fill that void. So as I grew up, obviously, things changed, and I matured, and honor became more important. But it wasn't really until I began to fully embrace my culture that honor became kind of a cornerstone. It was one of those stones that I laid in my life that said, nope, we don't go outside this box. This is where we are. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. And so that discovery really led me to realize that although the legal system and the law and the judgment is more societal, justice and the idea of justice is intrinsic. And that's us. That's our decisions to live life a certain way, to do things a certain way. Whether the laws of your society really embrace that or not is really irrelevant, because if you feel that you're living your life the way it should be led, and maybe the laws of your society go, yeah, no, we're not going to put up with that, you could simply relocate to another culture, to another society rather, and there it may be accepted. Now, there are certain things, obviously, that are not accepted in any society, and that's okay. Absolutely. Thou shalt not kill. Some of those really cool buzz phrases that we hear from modern-day Christians. So we hear all of those, and those are accurate, right? So my endeavors in life, my enjoyment in my life should never impede someone else's, right? They should only enhance other people's. And that's really my part of living in harmony with my fellow life forms here on this plane. So justice is intrinsic. So now, when we come back, I'm going to take a real quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about how our justice can help us look at ourselves honorably to discover the authentic self, because the authentic self is really the cornerstone of, well, all of our stones for that matter, of who we are and what we stand for. So we'll be right back after this quick message, and we'll talk about how we can wrap our minds around our authentic self.
In the air.
The time is now.
We're all waking up.
We're waking up.
We're all waking up.
It's all shifting.
New vibrations.
It's you.
It's you.
It's me.
It's all of us.
Together.
A new time.
A new day.
A new energy.
A new energy.
New reality.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
newrealitytv.com.
All right, welcome back, and of the Norse here, most importantly known for his courage to face Fenrir, put his hand in Fenrir's mouth, of which it got bit off. But ultimately, Tyr was the god of justice and law. Justice and law brings this idea of honor. It kind of centers around the idea that we don't want to be labeled, identified as an outlaw to that system, to the system of family. Well, I'm here to say you also don't want to be an outlaw to your authentic self. Being authentic in who you are does more for your better mental health than anything else. So thinking about our where we are in our core understandings of our authentic self, we have to think about those values that have been placed in our lives since birth. Our families and well-intentioned have been placing values in our well of the self since really before we actually came into the physical realm. People have been giving us these values, other entities giving us values. Now, some values we've derived, and those values are very important because we've learned lessons that secure them in place. Whereas some of the other values that people have kind of dropped into our lives as we've gone along, they can teeter and rock around and be manipulated and be modified depending on situations, depending on the experience that we have. But ultimately, we're in charge. So we get to make the decisions. We get to choose which rocks we're going to keep, which values, which belief systems that we want to have. No one else gets to make this decision. Now, granted, we give other people the authority to do this, and we say, yeah, they seem to have their act together, and they seem to be, well-intentioned. They seem to be, on the friendly side, whatever. And they're promoting this value, whatever this value is. So maybe, just maybe, there's something to that. So I'm going to try to adopt that value into my life, and I'm going to try to apply it to the things that occur. All well and good until we start realizing that, well, maybe they've had a very different experience than we've had. They've seen life very differently than we have. And so maybe this value doesn't apply as much to my life as it does to theirs. By all means, you're welcome to that, but understand it may not fit in my life. So having the ability to look at oneself intrinsically and discover what rocks we want to keep and which ones we don't, which ones we want to enlarge, which ones we want to kind of minimize. All of this management of rocks and rock sizes and the layers at which they appear is all up to us. We get to make that decision. No one else. They can put their rocks in to our well of the self, but it doesn't have to stay there. We can decide, that value just doesn't work for me. And this is like, as an example of this kind of situation, is think about generational hate, where you have men, and I'm going to use my own experience here. So in my experience, my grandfather and my father were very abusive, and they were hard men. My grandfather was a rock carver. He was, worked with granite a lot. So he was a very hard man. He would not go out of his way to abuse my father, but he would certainly, it was very swift, very physical, violent justice. Remember, justice intrinsic to him. And he would execute this justice on my father, right? So a story I have about my father growing up is he was rocking back on his chair at the dinner table, and my grandfather kicked the chair out from underneath him. And so he would fall to the floor, and said that we don't rock at the table, right? So he was a very hard man, and very. My father took that to the next step, and instead of explaining to my little brother and I the rules of engagement, it was quick social capital punishment for everything, all sins. When I had children, when I discovered, when my shield maiden and I finally came to that point when we had children, I chose to walk away from that. Is that I'm not going to do capital, or corporal punishment. I'm not going to do the violence that my ancestors did, right? And so we have a break now in this generational hate. Well, this is because I took that rock out of my well. That rock wasn't going to serve me and serve certainly my children and my family at all, right? Because that's just not the way it needs to be done. My children are smart. My children were intelligent. And so I could sit them down and go, hey, look, this behavior right here doesn't work, right? Nope. This is the behavior we're looking for. So I guess the memory here is courage to face some of these decisions as we look through and find our authentic self, and we discover those rocks that we don't need, we're working on our intrinsic meditation to discover which rocks we're going to keep, which ones we're not, which values, which virtues, which belief systems we want to keep, and which ones we don't. We can do that. Now, I'm not going to say it's always going to be sunshine and rainbows. As we look through these values, many of them will carry with them emotional energy, which will be released as we try to manage or work with it. So as we're, in my example, if I'm trying to work with breaking this generational hate, I may have some very painful memories associated with that I've got to be able to say, all right, wait, let's decouple the memory and the energy, dissipate the energy, learn from the lesson, learn the lessons from the event, and then kind of move that back to just, yeah, that's how it was, but that's not how it is, right? So I'm managing now my rocks. Now, this is a very simple case, and there's many values down there in your well that you're going to have to sort through. But once you do, this is the beautiful thing, is once you do and you discover your cornerstones, you discover the rocks that you're going to keep, it makes life easier. Life becomes a lot more simplistic, and you're exposing yourself to the extremes of emotion much less often, thereby able to keep a better mental space. That's really what this is all about. It's about managing the energies that then manage our mental space and allows us to find peace, comfort, harmony, joy, love, all of the things that we truly are searching for. So, we should always take some time each and every day to kind of look at our rocks. Maybe take some intrinsic reflection, look down deep. And yes, maybe some tears will fall. Maybe some anger energy will surface as we uncover the rocks that no longer serve us, that just have no value in our modern day life. You're going to do this process naturally, just in the what modern day humans call maturing. So there is a level of this already going on, but you can go in there and you can manage those rocks anytime you want. They're your rocks. It's your well. So you get to decide what rocks are in that well. There are rocks that we want, for sure, and there are rocks that will stay almost regardless what we do. But there are a lot of rocks that we have to discover, reveal what value they have in our lives. So, take a look at your rocks and be courageous, be honorable. Don't let yourself talk yourself out of it. Do the work. When you manage those rocks, your life becomes more simplistic, it becomes more joyful, it becomes more harmonious, it just becomes more peaceful. And that's really what we're after. All right? So enjoy Tears Day, and we will see you again tomorrow when we will talk about the wisdom of Odin. I also want to give a shout out to R and M, and those are their initials. I wish them absolutely the very best as we celebrated a hand fasting for them on last Friday. And I had an amazing time. An amazing group of people were at the ritual. So it was amazing, just an amazing time. I felt so peaceful, I could just feel the joy and love. So I want to give a huge shout out to those two because they are amazing. And I look so forward to seeing them. Once I discover his show, I will definitely get the links. You will find it in the show notes. And I will make sure that you have that, because amazing people, and I think you will really enjoy them as well. So Enjoy today, Tears Day, and we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we celebrate the wisdom of Othin. Love and light, my friends.
Watching for Felina's Belly Snake, a special production of Whispers of the Norse. Brought to you by the Alaska Wolf Hefnar in South Central Alaska. Guidance and wisdom, courtesy of an ancient Celtic Norse shaman. Thank you so much for joining us today.